Welcome. Let's get started. I am Chris and this is Michael. We are both registered dietitians and certified sports nutritionists. We're here to talk all about how to fuel for marathon performance. So I know that marathon season is right around the corner and you guys are itching to make sure that you fuel well. So we will be checking the chat box about every 5 or 10 minutes or so. So make sure you put any questions in there. We're going to try to monitor that, and we'll kind of be going back and forth to make sure we get your questions answered. But we want to make sure that we only have half an hour, so let's get rolling.
Let's roll.
Yeah, let's do this thing. Okay, so what are we going to mainly talk about today? So definitely discussing common mistakes. There are countless mistakes that marathoners make, so we want to make sure that you guys are smarter than that and don't make those mistakes. Whether this is your first marathon or your 25th marathon, it doesn't matter.
We're going to talk about the importance of training your gut. So we're going to talk about why that's important, how you can do it, all that stuff.
Absolutely. And discuss consistency, because this is huge, not only through training, but also during racing. And then next.
And then making a plan. So why should we make a plan? How do you make a plan?
Mm-hmm.
What are important things to do when making your plan?
Yep, that's what we help with. And then just emphasizing the fact that we are all very unique, that your plan should not necessarily follow your friends or your training partner's plan. So, and we'll talk about how all those pieces come together in terms of developing your own plan. All right, so let's roll. Common mistakes.
Common.
Oh, boy. Just stand at any marathon. You'll probably catch a few. But here's a big one. So only drinking water. So why is that an issue?
Definitely an issue because we increase the risk for hyponatremia, which is like a decrease in the concentration of electrolytes in our body. So when we only drink water, it kind of waters down the amount of electrolytes you have, especially when we're sweating out really a lot of fluid or lots of electrolytes.
This is of much greater consequences than just dehydration. That's the most common issue that marathoners are going to face. But hyponatremia is more common in females and anybody over 5 hours. That's just what we've seen in the literature, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen to anybody. So when you are only drinking water, this is a huge problem, guys. So don't make that mistake. Another one is not getting enough fluid at all.
Yep. So that's the person that's not drinking anything.
Great. So going to the other extreme, this is probably more of what we see. Inevitably, my runners hate to carry things. I don't like things in my hand. I don't like extra stuff.
Understandable.
Totally, right? So,
but that's
and
the
you
solution.
can see he's a runner who doesn't run with anything. I'm a runner who runs with things.
Yeah.
Sometimes at a certain point, but logistics is one of the hardest things to figure out here, and making sure that you're getting the right amount of fluid, whether you carry it on you or not, or whether you're going to rely on aid stations. So logistics is a big thing. Okay.
Then not getting enough electrolytes. So there's a few pieces of the puzzle, but if we're not getting enough of that sodium, the potassium, chloride, all that stuff, that causes issues as well.
Absolutely. Cramping.
Yep.
Nausea. The wrong amount of carbohydrates. So in preparing for this, I did like a quick Google search just to see what else is out there in terms of what other people have put on the good old interwebs. And I saw one person who seemed perhaps reputable, but saying, make sure you get at least 60 grams of carbohydrates an hour. And that's not necessarily the best idea. Our gut perfusion, the amount that our gut can actually deliver and digest at once during exercise, is about 1 gram of carb per minute. So if you're automatically trying to go over that, that's going to be a total disaster. Yes. Or not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like, I don't run with anything for 2 hours. Okay. Or 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever it is.
And then not eating properly leading up to the race. So the days in advance, the weeks in advance, not doing the right things then can all impact you on race day.
Absolutely.
Then this one goes back to what Chris was saying. So, if your friend Billy does this certain thing, just assuming that it's going to work for you because it works for Billy is a flawed approach.
Yes. It might be a good place to start, perhaps. Like, oh, you really like this drink? Cool, let me try it. But what works for one person
is not guaranteed to work for somebody else.
Correct. So, all right, training your gut.
Yeah. So your gut is an athletic organ, just like your muscles, your lungs, anything like that. We can train it to help your performance. So like Chris talked about, there's kind of like that rate that our gut can process everything that we're taking in, and we can kind of help push that limit a little bit in training to help us process as much as possible.
Right.
So enough fluid, as many carbs as possible, and the electrolytes, we can kind of help our gut to get used to processing larger amounts.
Absolutely. And just knowing that on race day, it shouldn't be any different than what you've used in training. We get all the time people who are like, oh, my marathon's in a week. What should I eat the day before? I'm like, you should have hammered that out like easily 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So, you want to mimic the time frame that you're going to be running. You want to mimic what you're going to be eating during and after, and, get it all trained, your legs and your gut.
Nutrition's not one of the things you can cram in the week before the
I like that.
race.
That's good. We should use that. No cramming here.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then another thing, during activity and with increased intensity, your blood is diverted away from your gut. So your gut is the last priority.
It's a low priority for sure.
So working muscles, obviously you're forcing those to do what they need to do. Your body has to keep your heart and your lungs and your livers and your liver and your kidneys going, and your brain. So your gut gets pushed down to the lower priority. The faster you're going, the more blood is diverted. The slower you're going, the less blood is diverted. So we'll talk about pacing here in a second.
The other piece of that is that with less blood there, you can process less of those fluids, the carbohydrates, the electrolytes. And that's, again, where training comes into play. So learning kind of those zones where you can stay and still process a good amount of those nutrients.
Correct.
Yes. And then training yourself to be able to essentially keep more blood if possible.
Yep, absolutely. So common mistakes there, are common symptoms are lots of nausea, anything from burping to, those kinds of things, if it's not actually getting in. So here's what we use. So we have people come in to our lab and we do what's called our training zones and fueling formula and our hydration. So this is an example of a real person. This is actually one of our blogs for somebody who's trained for Boston before. So we divide things into, we use the 5-zone system because we only have so many the exercise systems. So generally speaking, most people race a marathon in their zone 2, which you'll see here is using a good amount of fat for fuel, hypothetically. Your lactate is low. And of course, your VO2 is a little bit lower than it should be lower than your max. Some people can get into zone 3, more of a little bit of a tempo style. And then if you're a really elite athlete, then you might be bumping up against that zone 4. So you'll see in this, you've got heart rate zones, you've got pace zones. We don't have power on here yet, although I know a lot of people do use power for running. And then the carbs that we can actually ingest per hour over here on the right. So this gives you a range of minimum and maximum. So if you know that you're going to be racing and training at a heart rate of 148, in this case, to 154, then you need to be taking in 15 to 18 grams of carbs. Usually I'll lean people towards the higher end. But if they know they're going to be somewhere between zone 2 and zone 3, I'll kind of meet them in the middle. So somewhere between this number 18 and 26. And that's our goal to shoot for. So what we've seen in the textbooks is that the general recommendations for carbohydrates to adjust during exercise is 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. You can see for this is a smaller female, that ain't going to work for her. She's going to be struggling. So general recommendations are a great place to start from, but if you're really looking to dial it in and you're really looking to have a good race, because I know you've invested a lot in this, then why not just get it right for you?
Sure.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's really the big thing. It's like people say, well, I've been doing this and it's working all right. But it's like, my thing is, wouldn't you rather figure out exactly what you need and then not have to worry that it's a little bit off and
I agree.
create issues?
To me, this is like throwing a dart
and
with a blindfold.
Yeah, for sure. Let's take the blindfold off.
Oh, that drink sounds good. Maybe it'll work. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be in the Porta-John. Should I bring toilet paper with me? No, let's not make that an issue. Okay, so next thing, be consistent.
This is a pretty constant theme. Would you say consistent theme?
Yeah, it is.
So
Consistency is to be consistent.
So this is like a big theme. It's just be consistent. Like Chris said, like nothing that you do on race day should be something new. Like
Right.
if you're going to be using on-course nutrition, figure that stuff out in training.
Hopefully it works for your needs. The other thing in terms of consistency is drinking at frequent intervals. So, you know, people will go for hours and be like, oh man, you know, I just felt so good. I just, you know, whoops, I forgot to pay attention to the fact that I haven't drank in, you know, 2 hours or whatever the case may be. So personally, I like to use when my little, when my watch dings, then that's like a perfect indicator. Oh, take a little sip. So as long as you're being consistent and trying to drink and or fuel about every 10 to 15 minutes, there's a little bit of a caveat there for your first hour. If you've had breakfast, you've topped off those glycogen stores, and you don't necessarily have to start your fueling and hydration plan until a little bit later into the run, like 30 to 45 minutes, depending on you. Sometimes I'll have people start it even further. It depends on how much they're losing from a sweat concentration perspective and how fast they're going.
So if someone did have breakfast, is there a drawback to starting in that first hour just so that you're like in your routine throughout the whole race and you're not like in the second hour saying having to change it up?
Not necessarily, unless there's somebody who's prone to nausea.
Gotcha.
Right? So you're just, you know, that fuel tank is already filled and now you're trying to fill it a little bit more. So let yourself kind of get yourself used to being in that groove and get ready to go. So after this slide, I'm going to check questions here. So space your intake out, just like we were saying. 10 to 15 minutes is nice for some people. I've had people who lose over 60 ounces an hour in fluid. They have a smaller interval.
I mean, some of that comes back to like, think about like, you don't want to chug 40 ounces of fluid in the last 5 minutes of the hour that you were supposed to be drinking it.
Exactly.
So go ahead and space it out over that time.
Exactly. All right. So we're going to head back to our chat because I see we've got a couple of stuff. So somebody asked, does carb absorption differ running versus cycling? So slightly, yes. So if we were to do your VO2 testing here, running versus cycling, yes, your carbs to ingest per hour will be a little bit different because your VO2, the demand for running is going to be a little higher than it is for cycling. And again, it depends on your pace because your VO2 max is going to be different around the bike. It's not consistent across the sport. So did you ever we did do your biking and how close were they? Were they pretty close?
Better.
Yeah. So
like
would you say
5 points higher?
But you've been biking a lot longer than you've been running. Yeah,
for sure.
So we're using Michael as an example right now. So far, he is the record holder. So if y'all want to test your VO2 max and see if you can beat Michael, you were, was it 72? 72? It's legit, y'all.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah. So, so comparatively speaking, we would be able to see, okay, if you're going to be pacing, let's say you're going to be doing Ironman and you've got the marathon tacked on the end. So for your bike, we've got one nutritional strategy, and for your run, we've got another nutritional strategy. You also have to consider that there's a lot more jostling in running. So we want to be well prepped through the bike, but not necessarily over.
Yeah, I like to approach that one from like the gut perspective, because like when you're running, you have decreased blood flow to your gut versus cycling at like the same heart rate, because that same thing, like with running, you involve a lot more muscle groups, and so blood shunts away a little quicker.
Yes.
And so again, you're going to be able to tolerate or absorb a little bit less, even if it's like the same intensity, like heart rate wise or something.
Right.
From running versus cycling.
Yes. So somebody else asked, so the example that we gave in terms of training zones was somebody who is she's pretty decent. She's a pretty good athlete. So what do we suggest for the back of the packers? Again, for me, remember that the general recommendation is 30 to 60 grams of carbs an hour. But again, that doesn't take into account your size. It doesn't take into account all the things, right? So our recommendation, I mean, shameless plug, come get VO2 testing here so that we can truly dial in those needs for you. But I
think that's kind of the point of that, is we show that as an example, but really like everybody is so different that you can't look at another person and say, this is going to work for me, even if you're the same age, the same body size.
Right.
Like there's so many variables at play that it really, like, you kind of have to measure it for it to be exact.
Correct. I will tell you, just as a general, just from the experience of testing people here, most women, a nice kind of general place to be is about 30 grams of carbs per hour. And then for a lot of men, we usually are more like 40, 50, sometimes 60. So yeah, I mean, it's irregardless of speed, it's very specific to you and how many calories you're burning, not only from fat, but more importantly from carbs, because that tells us how much more you can absorb. So great questions, y'all. All right, so let me go back to our screen share. Okay, so then a great segue, y'all. Did we plant this question? I think that was awesome. So
we're gonna have to start.
yes, I know. So you gotta have a plan. Come on. Maybe. Oh, yes. Good job. Yay,
so
PowerPoint.
We want to look at our plan from a few different like kind of time periods. So there's the weeks leading up to our race is like a whole different period where we have some different things that we want to look at. So with that, so in those weeks before, and that can even spread out over like the months before, we want to look at what works and what doesn't. We want to experiment with what foods we tolerate, what foods we don't. That's going to be our pre-workout meal, the fueling and hydration strategy during our actual runs.
And even the day before, you guys. So we get that question all the time. Should I be drinking Gatorade all day the day before a marathon? No, that's terrible.
But you should be hydrated.
Yes. So check your urine. So we will send you guys our hydration guide, and that has a urine chart on it. Put it on the back of your bathroom, stick it in your wallet. I don't care where you put it. Just make sure that you're following that, because that's really, really, really important.
Yeah.
But make sure you know what you're going to have for dinner the night before, or at least narrow it down to, I like to give people,
like
have at least 3 choices.
Really well. Yeah.
Yes.
Like if you like do really well with like pasta and like chicken and broccoli, then like those are safe choices.
Yes.
But don't like, maybe that's not the night to try like I don't even know.
I don't know. Going to a new restaurant.
Like fried egg.
How about some sushi? Like I love sushi, but you know, sometimes that's probably not the best idea. And
you like want to choose foods that you know sit well.
Yes. Same thing with breakfast. We've got a new superfoods cereal that's coming out. That's kind of my like magical food. Some people do well with oatmeal. Some people do well with toast and peanut butter. Peanut butter is a crazy bad idea for me personally, because it's going to be all over somebody else's shoes by about 45 minutes into the race. But I found that out. Hummus is another one. Ooh, can't do it.
Yeah, I can't do hummus.
Perfectly fine food.
Peanut butter is a very safe food for me.
Is it? See? So that's why you got to iron it out. Yeah. Have a plan. You should have your dinners in the day before figured out, and your breakfast and whatever you're going to do during the race. So,
and that's the cool thing is like sync this up with your training plan. Like as you're building through your training plan, doing those long runs, practice this stuff for your long runs, because that's going to most closely simulate a race.
Right.
Unless you're doing like a couple of half marathons along the way to your marathon, you know?
Yes.
But like use your long runs as chances to practice all of this.
Correct. So in the days before, you'll see a little suggestion: carbs 3 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. That's what that says. Okay, y'all, this is what's in the textbook. If you do the math and figure out 12 grams of 12 grams per your weight in kilograms per day, that's a ridiculous amount of carbohydrates. So I just want to make sure that you know, if you ever look this up, this is what you're going to find. For what we've personally done, or what we've done within our practice, is having people eat consistently in the weeks leading up to long runs. Anything 18 miles or over, you should be thinking about what you're doing the days before, or even just before race day. Like, eat as normally, as consistently as you can. If you're like packing, if you can carb load. If anybody's heard of that, there is a very specific technique to that, but you can also just like totally go wrong there and just feel bloated and sore, and that's not what we're going for. So try to eat normally.
I think you can also boil that down to just like in the days leading up to your race or those long runs, just like make sure you're getting good quality carbs, complex carbs, and just like kind of emphasizing those. It's like you don't have to make it really big and complicated to get to 3 to 12 grams, you know, just like try and emphasize those things, because those are going to be important for your long runs and your races.
Correct. And if you are on like a keto diet, I'm not going to say that that's the wrong thing, but we do need glycogen to be able to fuel that. So if you are keto, you know, or whatever particular style of diet you're eating. And if you need help with that, that's why we're here. Then just making sure that you're consistent with that. In the hours beforehand, so usually, so 5 to 10 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. That's generally about a cup up to even 20 ounces. Check your urine.
Yeah, everything we say about hydration, like throughout the day and stuff, always circles back to monitor your pee color.
Yes.
Like unless you're taking like a B complex or a B vitamin, that can throw off your urine color. But like outside of that, urine color is like
it'll make it more electric, but
yeah,
it should still be.
But you can't
diluted.
use the same color chart for sure.
Right.
But it always comes back to just monitor your urine color.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
make sure you're hydrated.
Yay. And then make sure you have that very, very, very familiar breakfast or carb-rich snack, whatever that case may be, whatever you want to call it, roughly 2 hours before. And that's topping off those glycogen stores so that you're not relying on external food sources, you know, completely throughout the race. Some people don't do breakfast. It is totally fine to not do breakfast beforehand, but you've got to start that fueling plan right away. So no new foods on race day.
If there's nothing else you take away,
I know. Please do that.
Please don't introduce any new foods on race day.
Okay, so I've made all these mistakes, y'all. So that's why we can tell you. I remember having a sports drink that I had trained with, and I got so frustrated with it on race day, and it tasted terrible that I literally dumped it all out. Bad choice. Okay, but I mean, it's terrible. So another mistake I've made, I'm sure you've got some good stories, is I thought chocolate goo sounded like a great idea on the race course. I love chocolate. Oh my gosh, that was terrible. Yeah. Terrible.
And this is too.
And this is somebody's experience. Yeah. Like we all make mistakes. It's okay.
But I mean, I think this is one of those things that comes down to like knowing where you're going. So like if you're doing like a destination race kind of thing, like where you're gonna have to travel, like know what foods are going to be around you so you can like source them, like figure out what grocery stores are near where you're staying so you can get like rice cakes or what, like a loaf of bread, like something to make sure that you have those familiar foods. Don't just be like, oh, well, I'm traveling, so no familiar foods. Yeah. Like there are workarounds.
Yes. I always have some sort of a packaged bar that I know I can tolerate well. So again, I'm not going to say the brand or the type because it may not work for you, but just know that it's got to be something easily accessible in whatever place you're at, or carry it with you. All right. So
it is on that sports drink.
Yeah. So on that note, right? We're totally tricking you here, you guys. Yeah. I mean, sorry. There is no perfect sports drink. It is the one that works best for you. You want to jump in here?
Your perfect sports drink is the one that meets your needs. So you measure your needs, you figure out how many carbs you need, how many electrolytes. The perfect sports drink is the one that meets all those things, that you also like the flavor of, and that you can actually drink.
If you don't like it, you will not drink it. Thus, you are defeating the entire purpose of a fueling and hydration plan. So I won't say the particular brand, but there is a brand of sports drink that is in essence like cooked cornstarch. I know that sounds amazing, y'all. Doesn't it sound amazing? But some people just flat out don't like it, but they're like, that's what I fuel with because I think I should. But then they don't drink it because it's not very good. Marketing's amazing. You should drink it. I made my training partners, when I was training quite a bit, I made them so annoyed because every time I would drink my sports drink, I'd be like, they'd be like, I'm going to shoot you if you say that again. Like, stop it. It should be that good because you're like, wow, I want to drink that again.
And I think the other piece of this is don't water it down. Like you should be able to mix it to recommended strength. Don't water it down. You shouldn't have to hyper concentrate it to be able to tolerate it. And then the other piece of that is it's something you can drink like kind of no matter the temperature.
Yes.
Like in the summer, it's possible your drink is going to get warm.
We're pointing outside because it is summer right now.
It's possible your drink's going to get warm. So like if it's a flavor that only tastes good ice cold, maybe not the best option.
Yeah. So hopefully you have a couple of backups. So yeah. Okay. So let's move on. Knowing your unique needs. So again, this just goes back to that example that we showed you of the training zones and the fueling formula for that particular woman. Yours is going to be different based on your pace, your experience, etc. So one thing that we can help you out with is your hydration formula.
Yeah. So doing the sweat testing to figure out how much sweat you're losing, so how much fluid we need to replace, and then also that concentration, so how much sodium you're losing, so we know how much to match,
Right.
potassium, all the things.
We sometimes have people who are like, oh, I don't need that. Why would I need that? So it's quite fascinating to see the differences. I'll give you an example. Some of the lowest sweaters that we've had here have lost as little as 215 milligrams of sodium per hour and as little as 8 to 9 ounces.
So not a lot. Not much at all.
No,
Probably
no.
not the person that's super
They're
worried
also
about it.
they're also the one who are at risk of hyponatremia because they think they need to drink more and they're not losing that much.
Right.
So they're going to actually gain weight during exercise. That is
Bad.
very, very, very bad, right? That's pushing you towards hyponatremia. We don't want to go there. On the flip side of that, we've seen people who are losing over 5,000 milligrams of sodium per hour.
Can we convert that to grams?
5 grams.
That's a lot of grams.
That's a lot of grams. That's 2 teaspoons of salt. 2 teaspoons per hour. And upwards of 60 to 70 ounces per hour. Like that's
a lot.
Ridiculous in terms of that change. There is no way of being able to tell what concentration you have unless you actually test it. I totally recommend you taking your little scale and doing a pre and post weigh-in, especially if you're somebody who you think, we have people who come here all the time. They're like, I sweat a lot. And we're like, yeah, we see that.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
It's cool. But, getting in the habit of doing pre and post weigh-ins, you should lose a little bit, but we want to limit it to less than 2% of your body weight. So you can do a little calculation. For some people, that's a pound. For some people, that's 4. Just totally depends on you. So if you lose some, that's normal. Your body can handle that. That's okay.
I mean, we're designed to lose some.
Yes, absolutely. It's when we get further than that. We had a particular case who came in here, and she thought it was normal to be dizzy and passing out at every race. She lost over 2%. It was almost 2.5% of her body weight in fluid in 35 minutes. Like you just can't. Oh, that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
So
sure. I mean, that's definitely an extreme case where it's like extra important to like make sure you're doing all this stuff as well as like plenty of other steps to limit sweat rate.
Right. And then what we call our fueling formula. So that was just like that chart that you saw that showed how many carbs you need per hour. That's totally based on your volume of oxygen or your VO2. So a lot of people, when they think VO2 testing, they just think of like, I'm just going to go as hard as you can. Yes, that's VO2 max. But the VO2 that's important to us from a fueling perspective is everything under that.
Everything along the way to figuring out that max is what we use to put together those zones and the carbs to ingest per hour at each of those intensities. Correct. Which also is super useful if you're doing a lot of training because, those tempo days that might be above your marathon pace, definitely need to fuel those properly.
Yes. Yeah. So, or if you're doing 5K, 10Ks, larger demand, you're doing longer, in leading up to that. So there's a difference, and that's where we can help you out and make that more specific and unique to you. That way you're not blindfolded throwing a dart.
Right.
So in summary, we always want to make sure that we're kind of tying up those loose ends. So train your gut.
Yep. Be consistent with your carb intake, your fluid intake, and also like, again, just coming back to those familiar foods. Like don't do anything crazy on race day that you haven't already been doing. But then again,
just like new shoes, don't wear new shoes on race day.
Yeah. Even throughout the race, just consistently consuming that carb and fluid intake, spacing it out so your body has time to process it. And all of that will come together to help you have a better race.
Yep, absolutely. Hydration is huge. Like I said, we'll send you guys a hydration guide if you don't already have one. And that has the peak color chart in it. So
it's a good chart.
Yes, it is a good chart. It's very useful. And then get tested. We're here, again, shameless plug. We are here to help you out. So we are dietitians and sports nutritionists, and we can do that fueling test, and we can do your sweat testing. So we can literally take all the guesswork out. Like why would you want to guess and waste all this money on buying random things that your training partner Sally does, and then it doesn't work for you, and then
poor Sally gets a bad rap.
I mean, geez. So anyway, so find out what works for you and then stick to it. So it's your unique needs, and then you still have to do a little bit of experimenting from a flavor perspective, and that kind of thing.
And that's the other thing is coming to race day, people like start to second guess everything they're doing. They start to second guess your training plans, like, oh, did I do enough?
That's
and people do the same thing with like their fueling plan. They're like on race day, like, oh, is it going to be enough? Maybe I should grab some extra goos along the way to make sure. It's like, no, trust what you've been doing this entire time. Trust that you have figured it all out and stick to it.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So,
we wanted to let you guys know about our upcoming experiment. So keep an eye on our blog. So sometime early mid-October, we're going to start this experiment off. But what we're going to do is we're going to have someone who's targeting a spring marathon, and we're going to do all the training zones, the fueling and the hydration, all of that's testing. And we're going to kind of follow them throughout the testing process, but then applying those results and throughout their whole training process, talking about all of that. It's going to be super cool. So definitely follow along.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's our blog, so that you can easily find it.
Check it out. So thank you guys so much for coming. But if you have any suggestions as to what you want to learn about, what do you want to know about, let us know. We're here. Just email us, info@theenduranceedge.com, Chris@theenduranceedge, Michael@theenduranceedge.com. So we are happy to help you. And whatever marathon you're training for, good luck and do it right.